Alright guys, it is time for another spooky follower story time. This one in particular, just something about it gives me the heebie-jeebies so bad. Let's jump straight into it though. I am Autumn in Appalachia and I share spooky stories. If you have a scary story of your own, paranormal or not, that you would like to share, please feel free to comment or send me a DM. Make sure as well to add me on Facebook, same handle, Autumn in Appalachia. Also, I'm just going to go ahead and thank you guys in advance for 9,000 followers. I feel like I literally just last week thanked y'all for like 8,000 followers, and here we are approaching 9. Thank you so much for all your love and support. So this story comes from KK. We're calling her KK because of her username. She said that she and her best friend, Sweetie, have been inseparable since the 7th grade. Now, after they graduated high school, they promised each other that they were going to find a place together. KK said they were so excited to have their first little bit of freedom together. It took them 4 months, but they finally found a place that seemingly was perfect. She said that they were about 2 hours outside of Seattle, Washington, and that they stumbled across a house, 3-bed, 2-bath, and it was $1,500 a month. It seemed too good to be true, but they ended up doing a walkthrough, and she said everything was pristine. It was perfect. No creepy corners, no bad vibes, and the landlord, she said it should have been her first red flag, but did not even ask them for a deposit. He just hands them the keys, and she did note that he had kind of a weird smile on his face when he did so, but they looked past it and began moving in. She said that the first few nights that they spent in the home, it was absolute bliss, that they talked, they cooked, they laughed until their stomachs hurt, and that it felt like the start of something magical, but that the magic did not last. One night, KK is setting the Roku up in the living room while Sweetie is in the kitchen cooking. Now, she sees Sweetie walk right past her, and so she calls out to her and says, "Hey, would you mind handing me that remote?" A minute later, she feels a tap on her shoulder, and when she turns around, Sweetie is standing there with this really mean look on her face, and she hands her the remote and says, "You could have done it yourself," in this very sharp tone. It kind of made KK freeze because it was very unlike her best friend to just like pop off at the mouth at her like that. And she said it did sting, but she decided to brush past it and let it go because they were really tired. They'd been moving all day long. A few minutes later, though, when KK goes into the kitchen, she notices that Sweetie is standing there stirring the pot of food, and she looks up with this big happy smile on her face like she had not just snapped at KK, and this confused KK. So she was like, "Why were you mad at me a second ago?" And Sweetie looks confused. She's like, "I wasn't mad at you." And so she's like, "Yeah, I asked you to hand me the remote." And she's like, "I never handed you the remote. I never walked through the living room." She kind of just laughs it off when her best friend tells her this, but she said internally it freaked her out because she knew what she saw and she knew what she felt when she felt the tap on her shoulder. Later that night, they both decide to sleep on the couch because the bedrooms were not set up. Around 2 a.m., Sweetie gets up to go to the bathroom, and a few minutes later comes back looking really confused. She looks at KK and says, "Why did you come knock on the bathroom door and ask me to hurry up? We have 2 bathrooms." This made KK's blood run cold, and she looks at Sweetie with fear in her voice and says, "I didn't get up." Sweetie didn't believe her. She thought that KK had to be playing some sort of a prank on her because it was just too real. She thought maybe it was like payback for the whole debacle from earlier, but KK insisted that she absolutely never got up and definitely did not go knock on any bathroom doors. The next day, they decide they are going to go and purchase some security cameras. They get 4 cameras, and they put one in the living room, the hallway, outside, etc. Now, weeks passed by after this without incident. KK said it was almost enough time for them to forget what they had already experienced in their new home. One day, while both girls are at work, KK gets a motion-activated alert on her phone from the living room camera. When she pulls up the feed, she sees Sweetie, who is supposed to be at work, standing in the middle of the living room, motionless, staring at the TV like she is in some sort of a trance. Now, at first, she's trying to logically debunk this, and she thinks that maybe it's some sort of a glitch, and it's like a still shot from earlier that day. until Sweetie very slowly and in unnaturally slow way begins to tilt her head. Now this freaks KK out, but she still thinks that maybe for some reason her friend has like come home in the middle of the day, so she texts her and says, "Hey, why are you home? I saw on the camera." And she said, "I'm not at home, I'm at work." She replied instantly. KK takes a screen cap on her phone of the camera feed that she's currently looking at and sends it to Sweetie, and Sweetie instantly replies and says, that does look like me, but I swear I'm not home, I'm at work right now. She said that after this, things in the house completely spiraled. Footsteps would echo while they are both standing in the same room. The bathroom door would slam shut on its own. At night, they would hear voices, their own voices, calling out each other's names from down the hall. The worst, they said, was the guest room. It was a room that always freaked them out. They never used it. They kept the door closed and the light off. One day they get home and the light is on behind the door. Sweetie, deciding to be the brave one of the bunch, opens the door, and when they look in, not only is the light on, the bed is perfectly made, even though neither of them had touched it. When they look on the bed, there is some sort of a piece of paper laying there, laid in a way like something wanted them to find it, and it had some sort of weird gibberish scribbled all over it that they couldn't quite make out, and it absolutely made their hearts sink to their stomachs. Now do keep in mind those cameras, because logically, if it were me, I'd think this is like so crazy, somebody is literally like broken into my house, I've got a person living in the walls of my house. The cameras that they had pretty much pointed to every angle of their home other than like private areas like the bathroom. Nothing was ever caught on camera, and those cameras were functioning. They take this piece of paper and set it on the kitchen counter, and they are just staring at it, asking themselves and each other, how in the hell, say it with me, how in the Kentucky fried hell is this possible? They were so petrified, they did not even want to sleep there that night, but they really had no choice. They had just went balls to the wall and put a bunch of money on this new home, and they can't really back out of it, nor do they have the money to move elsewhere. They did not sleep that night. The next morning, Sweetie decides to call her mom, who had always been very involved in church, and kind of let her in on what was going on, hoping that maybe somebody from her mom's congregation, the pastor, could help them out potentially. Sweetie's mom quickly returns the phone call and says she is going to send a lady over by the name of Miss J, and explained that Miss J was somebody who had previously prayed over other people's homes who had had similar issues. Not long after, Miss J pulls right into the driveway. Now, when she pulls into the driveway, both girls go outside to greet her. She barely acknowledges the girl. She is sitting in her car, just death staring up at this house, and eventually when she steps out of the car, she refuses to step off of the gravel onto the walkway. The first words out of Miss J's mouth were, "This house ain't clean." They broke down and told her everything so far that they had experienced, and she quietly listened and then responded after they were through and said, "I'm sorry, but I physically cannot bring myself to go in that house." Sweetie, with desperation in her voice, says, "Please, can you at least just pray over it? Like, we're desperate for help." And she said that the most that she would do is pray from outside the gate, because she was too scared to let whatever is in that house potentially form an attachment to her. After Miss J finishes her prayer, she turns to both girls and says, "My advice, don't spend another night in that home." They decided to listen. They spend the night at Sweetie's mom's house, and the next day they gather a few friends, they go over to the house, they pack whatever they can fit into the cars, and she said none of them went in the guest room. They were too petrified. She said that whatever belongings they had in there got left in there. They kept that door closed, and all the other things that they could fit, they pack up and they leave. They move out. KK then called the landlord and spilled the beans. She just explained everything that happened in the house. He quietly listened, and when he did respond, did not sound shocked in the slightest. he just said, okay, thanks for taking care of it. And she promised to leave the keys where he could find them. And that was that. She said that the activity immediately stopped when they moved out. She had never been through anything like that before moving in there, and they never went through anything like that after moving out of there. She did try to, in the months and years afterward, do some research to try to find some history on the home, was never able to find anything. And she said she oftentimes, when she thought about it, felt sorry for whoever the next renters were going to be, but they would occasionally drive by that place to see if anybody was living there, and she said it looked like nobody was there and that the house was the exact same as when they left it. To this day, KK and Sweetie both wonder what the hell that was in that house. To me, and from my own personal experiences, if you guys have ever watched any of my own spooky stories, it sounds like a mimic. You know, one of my very first stories that I ever shared was one where my boyfriend saw me sitting on the bed, clear as day, like just like you were seeing me now, and it was not me. I was in the bathroom. I heard the entire thing happen. I just did not physically see it. This thing that was sitting on the bed was wearing the same outfit I was wearing that day, had my hair fixed the same way. Like that's a petrifying feeling, and it was very compelling to me as well, because my boyfriend is such a hardcore skeptic. Like, he just does not believe in things like that. Very, very logically minded person, you know? So that's my theory. You guys let me know what your theories are in the comments below, and stay tuned for some more spooky stories.
Tell me a story about a time that you know that you saw something, but you don't ever tell this story because you know that no one would.
Okay, so it's not so much about what I saw, more about what I didn't see. So a few years ago, during the pandemic, me and my husband went roughing it camping with a big group of friends. And this was not like campground camping. This was BLM, out in the middle of nowhere, no cell service, disconnected from society, like roughing it camping. So the plan is we were going to go up Friday. Me and my husband were going to leave Monday morning. Everybody else was going to leave Sunday night before Sunday. So we go up, do our thing, have a good time. And one of the things that I noticed at some point was that I hadn't seen a lot of wildlife. Like, I had barely seen any birds. I had not even really seen a ton of bugs. But I never saw any squirrels or chipmunks or anything like this. And this is like out in the wilderness where there should be a lot more wildlife. And I'm not super outdoorsy, but even I know a quiet forest is not a safe forest. There's something in there. But because we were with a big group of people, I kind of brushed it off and nothing had happened. So I felt safe, or safer, with a big group of people like that. So everybody starts packing up to leave Sunday night. And the last car leaves about 10-15 minutes before sunset. So they leave, and me and my husband are sitting there eating, and as the sun is setting, I start getting this feeling of fear that's quickly turning into being terrified. And the reason why I say that is because part of me realizes, okay, I haven't seen a lot. It's really quiet, and that's never a good sign in the forest. But I keep seeing in my head these hairy arms, and behind me is like a cluster of trees. It's like kind of like a bush of trees. And I keep seeing these arms come behind me and pull me into the tree, kind of like a cartoon. So I figure this is just my brain freaking out because everybody just left and we have no cell service. So I just feel disconnected and alone. So that's why I'm scared. But for the life of me, I could not shake this feeling. And this was going on for a solid hour plus. I could not shake this feeling, and it was only getting worse. And this was terrifying. I couldn't move. I was just sitting there, just kind of tense, and I wasn't talking that much, and my husband wasn't talking that much. But you know how when you're around the campfire, sometimes you kind of just get lost in staring at the fire. So that's what I figured he was doing. That's what he figured I was doing. And then at some point, one of us mentions we're a little uneasy. And then the other one admits that they are also, and we quickly realize that we are both terrified. Something's not right. Now, I do want to say me and my husband have been camping before by ourselves. It was not just the fact that we were alone. We had been alone camping before. It wasn't an issue. This time felt different. This time felt bad. So my husband brought out the protection we brought, and we both unloaded multiple rounds into a tree stump. So we were expecting that to make us feel better, like a tension release almost. It only made us both feel worse. In my head, I was hearing the message that if we did not leave, we would die. It felt like we had pissed something off even more than we had just with merely our presence had before. So after getting that message that if we don't leave, we're going to die, I was like, all right, I'm not comfortable staying here overnight. We need to go. And my husband was like, okay, yeah, let's go. We're going, because I feel the same way. In under 45 minutes, less than an hour for sure, we had packed up everything and even cleaned up some of the campsite because we just didn't feel right leaving it dirty. But we were both wearing protection. And at one point I sat in the car. And we had at least one dog with us at the time, I think. So anyways, we leave, and once, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes after we get to the store, I start to feel it kind of dissipate a little bit. But once we got to the actual highway, I felt better, but I still kept feeling like something was pushing us out. To this day, if we drive by that highway and that exit, I automatically feel that like terror or just a little bit of that, you know? So after that, I hadn't thought too much about it. I figured I had just spooked myself, the both of us had, and we were just gonna move on. And it wasn't until about a year later when my dad mentioned this Bigfoot podcast. And I had heard of Bigfoot before, but always just figured it was like an urban legend. And I like some of those stories. So, sure, I'll listen to it just to hear what they have to say. And there was one eyewitness that said that explained the same kind of terror. And it just immediately brought those feelings back up. And then I remembered this happened. So cue me going down this rabbit hole. I went down the rabbit hole of all of the cryptids and all of that, and a lot of the eyewitnesses, especially about Bigfoot, say the same kind of thing, that they have this overwhelming terror, and not just non-outdoorsy people like me who are scared of the woods, and I'm not specifically scared of the woods, but people that are like Green Berets and people that have lived in the woods and have grew up in the woods and are hunters, people that have come in contact with all sorts of these top predators, and they've never experienced fear like that, even on the battlefield, except for in the presence of what they would say would be Bigfoot. And not even the presence. Sometimes they don't see them, and yet they still get that feeling. And that is what made me think maybe we were experiencing something that we didn't even know. And some of these stories and theories are that, Bigfoot has this ultrasonic kind of skill that they can send out, and tigers have this. So it's actually, we see it in the animal kingdom where tigers can let out this sound wave. I forget exactly what it's called, but it's this sound wavelength that we can't necessarily hear with our ears, but it hits our nervous system and makes us have this terror response that is completely uncontrollable. And for oftentimes it makes people freeze or prey freeze. So the theory is that they have that and use that to either get people to move out of their territory or make them freeze so they're easier to attack. And also that those images that I was getting of me being pulled back in the chair, I hadn't mentioned that to anybody until I had heard the possibility of what's called mind speak. It's telepathy, where there's been reports that they've heard something in their brain, they are talking to you telepathically. And so I don't know if I believe that, but I could see where people would experience that, because I feel like I experienced that. Now, again, I don't know if that's what I experienced. I don't. And I don't think I'm ever going to know. But I just find it interesting that our experience was so similar to a lot of these other sightings and experiences, which also makes it more terrifying. But I also find it interesting that we hadn't really mentioned this to anybody, until I talked to my dad about it. And, you know, I can talk to my parents about that. They're safe with that. So we had mentioned it to them, hadn't thought too much of it, but like, oh, that's interesting. And then recently, like in the last couple months, my husband's cousin had reached out to us, and he had gone with us on that trip, and he had been back and wanted us to go with him again. And we're like, probably not. And he's like, well, why? And we told him why. And he's like, you know, that's interesting you say that, because we always felt really uneasy after the sun went down up there in that location. Another possible coincidence is this is the southern Sierra Nevadas. If you know anything about the Bigfoot legends, the northern Sierra Nevadas is where the Peterson Gimlin film was filmed. And once I had found that out, I had researched our specific location and seen if there was any sightings, and there had been a few reports near that area. So needless to say, I probably won't ever go back there. Certainly not at night, and I'm gonna go with a big group of people. And I don't know if I'm ever gonna be able to go back up anyways. So never saw anything, never heard anything, but the terror I have felt, or I never felt before and haven't felt since, unless I'm talking about this or remembering this story.
Someone sent me a DM to tell me about this terrifying creature that they saw in the woods on a camping trip. So creepy TikTok user tales. And if this is nighttime, I would come back and watch this in the morning, because when I first read this story, my son actually walked in my room and I threw a pillow at him because it scared me so much. So it is a little scary. I'm not sure if this person wants to be anonymous. We're just going to call him Amy. If they want to jump in the comments though, that is cool. Amy told me that she went on a camping trip one time with her dad to this place called Fairy Lake, and they were actually going with her dad's friend, but they had gotten there first, so they were there a few days before her dad's friend and her dad's friend's kids. The trip starts off totally normal. They're fishing, they're having a great time. The tide in the lake, I guess, comes up, so they decide that they're going to move their camp up, like up to higher ground. So her dad loads everything up. She gets in the back of the truck. She's riding in the back of the truck up to where they're going to set up their new camp. And she told me that she could feel something watching her. Something just didn't feel right. She just kind of attributed this to being in the middle of the woods, and that just is going to kind of happen. Once they get to where they're going to set the new camp up, her dad gets everything unloaded and starts putting it all together. She's sitting there and she's watching what he's doing, and she says that she hears like rustling, like coming from the woods, like coming from the trees, but it's close and it sounds large. She told me that she looks in the woods and all she can see is like this set of eyes staring back at her. It looks like it is tall, but she can't make out exactly what it is. She just thinks in her mind, must be an animal. We are in the middle of the wilderness camping. She told me she brushes it off and just ignores it. The next day, her dad's friend arrives with their children. That night, Amy is asleep in her tent, and she wakes up because she can hear something walking around their campsite, just slow pacing. She said that there was no way that she was going to look outside, so she just sat up and stayed awake until the pacing stopped. The next day, everything is normal, and the rest of the trip actually goes off without a hitch. Nothing creepy happens, and nothing freaks her out. The end of the trip comes, and they're getting everything packed up. Her dad is loading everything into the car. She decides she's going to go on ahead and just get in the seat and wait for him to be done. So as she's sitting in the car and her dad is off doing something, she's kind of tapping a little bit of a beat to herself. Just kind of what you do when you're trying to pass the time. She told me that as she's sitting there and she's tapping this beat, she hears something on the window tapping along to her beat. She thinks it must be my dad. So she whips around and looks around the vehicle and realizes that there is no one around. As she's trying to figure out where the tapping is coming from, her dad approaches the vehicle and the tapping immediately stops. He gets into the car, he looks at her, kind of is wondering, why are you so pale? What happened? Are you okay? And she's like, I'm fine. I don't know. It was just weird. Something happened, the tapping. And her dad just says, okay, I've got everything loaded. Time for us to head home. I hope you had a great time. She's thinking, yep, awesome. And they start to head out. As they're driving out of this campground, she looks into the woods and she says that she sees what she can best describe as a deer, except it's too big to be a deer and it's kind of standing on its hind legs. Its legs almost look like it's wearing the deer as a suit. She told me that it has antlers and it's kind of, like I said, standing up, and she can see its abdomen, which isn't bright. It's lumpy. It's like it doesn't fit what is inside of this deer. She told me that this thing just stares at her and she is too stunned to speak, and she's looking out the window and making eye contact with this thing, and she said that it felt as if it wanted her to see it. She says something to her dad after they had kind of passed. He looks, he doesn't see a thing. I took her exact description and I plugged it into AI, so I'm going to insert that now. When you take her description and you plug it into AI, this is what it creates. I wasn't there. I can't say that this is exactly what she saw. This is just what AI creates when told what she saw. From her description, I feel like what she saw was way more terrifying than what we're looking at here, but I don't manipulate it too much. I just plug in the description and AI spits out what it spits out. After she sees this, they go home. She never sees anything like this again. Wondering if anyone has seen anything like this, has experienced anything like this, if anyone has any ideas on what she may have seen in the woods that day and what basically felt like it was stalking her throughout her entire trip. If you have any ideas or if you've seen something like this, drop it in the comment. Like, I kind of know what I think, but I'm just curious to hear what everyone else has to say and what their thoughts are. Thank you so much for listening. If you have a story that you want to send me, there is an email in my bio, or you are welcome to send me a DM. Thank you for dealing with my glasses today. I have this weird eye twitch that I've had ever since I got sober. It comes and goes. This is the only thing that will stop it. These were the cheapest ones that I could get at the optometrist, so here we find ourselves. Also, I sizzled half my hair off on the wood stove and also burned my arm, so things are going really good. So that's why we're dealing with this. But it is all good. I am just happy to be here, and I hope that everyone has the best day.
So one of the most documented cases of a werewolf to ever exist happened in Southeast France. And honestly, I think the only logical reason behind this is a lot spookier than any of the supernatural reasons. So to understand the theories behind it and why I think this is so spooky, you have to understand the attacks. The first recorded attack happened in June of 1764. There was a woman who was out on the farm. She was tending to her cattle when all of a sudden she was approached by a beast, but said that it was almost wolf-like. Wolves that were in her herd managed to actually get this away from her, but not long after this, a 14-year-old showed up brutally unalive. This marks the beginning of a long line of attacks. But the people who were able to actually see this thing and survive described this thing as larger than a wolf with reddish brown fur, an elongated and strong tail, and long fangs. Said that it would run at supernatural speeds, was very cunning, and was not scared around humans. And this is why this is literally the most documented case of a werewolf, is because over the next 3 years, this creature unalived anywhere between 90 and 100 people and injured 30 more. Many of these victims ended up headless or partially eaten, which fueled the rumors that this was more than just an ordinary wolf. So fear spreads throughout all of France. Locals and noblemen end up organizing these hunting parties to try to get this thing. However, this creature seems immune to regular bullets, regular traps. Because this is becoming actual news, King Louis XV is oh, I gotta get involved in this. So he goes out of his way to send professional hunters to this area to get rid of the beast. And they unalived multiple wolves in the process, but ultimately the attacks continued. So by June of 1765, the king is okay, I'm gonna send out my personal guy. I have a guy and I'm gonna send him out. His name was Francois, and he ended up unaliving a massive wolf. Standing upright, this wolf would have been 5 feet and 7 inches. He brought the carcass with him back to Versailles, and the king was okay, the beast has been slain. However, 2 months after this happening, the attacks continued. And how this all came to a resolution was a guy by the name of Jean Chastel taking a silver bullet and that allegedly working. And after this, the attacks ceased completely. Ever this wolf's body was taken in for an autopsy, it was reported to be much larger than a normal wolf, had very unusual features, again pictured below, and human remains were found in its stomach. The weird thing is the one that Francois unalived actually was taxidermied and sent to the royal court. This one allegedly was reported to be rotted beyond recognition, which definitely fueled rumors of just a weird cover-up happening. A lot of people think that this could be a real werewolf, which honestly, maybe. Some people think that this was a hyena or a lion that belonged to a nobleman or could have escaped from a traveling show. Totally think that this theory could hold up, especially with the way that they're describing it. It seems like a lion or hyena. I also think a lot of the people that were hunting this thing and not able to actually do anything about it started to give it some supernatural traits that it didn't actually have because they were embarrassed. I'm sure trying to explain to the king why they couldn't do their job. The theory that keeps me up at night and gives me so many chills is that Jean Chastel himself was doing all of this. He was known to have these large, massive dogs, and he also had a pretty big falling out with the public. So the theory is that maybe he bred the two together, a mastiff and a wolf, and trained them to attack. Also some rumors that he had connections to a noble family that transported exotic animals. After having a falling out with his town and with his church, maybe, possibly, he trained something. Or maybe, even worse and creepy of all, maybe it was just him in a wolf suit. The beast avoided armed men, mostly targeted women and children. And during the period where the attacks had briefly stopped for a couple of months, Chastel was in prison, because he was arrested for interfering with the royal hunt led by Francois. His motive was probably just elevating his status in the community. Also, many of the victims were headless, which is just an odd thing for an animal to do. There's no telling exactly what happened at this point from something that happened back in the 1700s. I think that there's something very suspicious about him. So maybe he had a direct hand in the creation or the release of this said beast. Maybe he was the beast himself. Maybe he was just a very lucky hunter that finally took down the beast. and I'm just not giving him his due credit. I don't know if you actually believe in werewolves though, because I really, really, really want to find a very convincing story, and I'm struggling to.
Someone sent me an email and said that they saw a terrifying creature standing on the side of the road in the middle of the night. They do want to remain anonymous, so we're just going to call him Amy. Amy lives with her boyfriend who travels for work a lot, and when he does travel, she's the one that takes him to the airport. So this night, she did have to take him to the airport, but it was like a super early flight or a super late flight, depending on how you look at it, but basically he had like a red eye. She said that from the very beginning, this night just seemed weird. She just felt off. She was just having heightened anxiety, like something was up. And even when he was like loading his stuff in the car, she was basically hurrying him. Come on, let's go, let's move. She just didn't want to be out there. They get everything loaded up in the car. They start heading to the airport. She said the airport is about 15 to 20 minutes away from where they're living at the time. She told me that normally she likes to drive back roads, but this time they did take the highway to get to the airport. Honestly, same. I really like back roads too, so I get that. She gets her boyfriend dropped off. They say their bye. She hops back in the car and she starts to head home. She gets to the point where she's at the crossroads where she has to decide if she's going to take the highway or if she's going to take the back roads. She decides that she's going to take the back roads. She starts driving and she says as she's heading down this back road, like it just hits her like immediately like you messed up. Anxiety is just hitting her like a ton of bricks. Something just doesn't feel right. She is just not okay. She tries to calm herself down, just get it together. She turns on the radio. She's jamming out to music. She's like, good, I'm just going to get home. Everything is fine. She's still having that anxiety. The roads are dark. She just feels super alone. And then she notices that there is another car ahead of her on this back road. So she speeds up just to get a little bit closer to them. She gets closer to them. She says that she like does feel better, but something just feels off. But she just keeps driving, and then she's driving down the road. She looks out her passenger window, and she said off to her right is a field. She's looking out the window, and she's looking into this field, and she says that what she sees is a creature that is 8 to 9 feet tall. Standing in this field, she says it's slightly hunched over, and it is green. She said no question at all, it was standing there clear as day. Now remember, she's not alone on this road, so there is that one car that's ahead of her. She had sped up to get close to. Well, next thing she knows, they are booking it. In her mind, that means they saw it too. That's clarification. I'm getting the hell out of here. Her and this other car are just speeding as fast as they can away from this field down the road. They come to a turnoff. That car turns off, heads that direction. She stays straight to get home. She speeds like crazy. She gets home. She goes inside. She does not sleep that night. She says that she checks the doors like 3 times just to make sure that everything is locked up. She told me she has told like some relatives about this. They really don't have any insight and just get kind of spooked. But she told me that from now on, she will always take the highway. What do you think she saw? As always, thank you so much for listening. Like I said earlier, I've got a ton of emails to go through and I'm going through them. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for participating. I really enjoy all of these stories. If you have anything that you would like to submit, my email is up in my bio. DMs are fine too. Emails do work better for me just because I'm old.
Hey friends, if you want to hear something scary, don't scroll. So I've decided in the wake of the end of this app, I'm going to unleash all of my scary stories that I was saving for you guys. I mean, unless you follow my YouTube channel, and then you'll get everything. All of it. Soft Taco, the same name that I have on here. You can find me on basically all platforms as Soft Taco. So anyways, let's get into the story. So I was around 13 years old when this story took place, and this story revolves around me and my brother getting lost in the woods, which seems to be a reoccurring thing in my childhood. So me and my brother decided to go on a little hike in the woods, and there was like a trail behind our house. Not really technically behind our house, but it was like near our house. Okay, so like we were super familiar with the woods behind our house and the trail and whatnot. But this particular day, of course, we wandered off the trail out of curiosity and boredom. Yeah, and then we realized that we couldn't find our way back. We were fucked. We kept walking for, I think, another like 35 minutes. Clearly in the wrong direction because we didn't know where we were. That's when we came across like an old hunter's cabin. It looked old because it was kind of like old looking, okay? It looked abandoned, creepy, like something out of a fucking horror movie. But we were actually pretty lucky that we found that because at that point it was starting to get dark outside and we had no idea how to get home. So we figured we would stay inside this little cabin until dawn, when the sun started to come out, and then, you know, we would be able to see, maybe feel our way home. So we got the cabin thing all set up for us to sleep in, and honestly, I did not get much sleep that night. It was very spooky and creepy and creaky and scary, but that wasn't even the worst part of it. You just fucking wait. After a while, we started to hear some noises out in the woods. It started out with like twigs snapping and rustling of leaves and stuff, but it sounded like it was getting closer and closer and closer to the little hunter's cabin that we were hunkered down in, until eventually we started to hear scratching on the outside of the cabin walls. And mind you, this is a fucking hunter's cabin. There is not a front door. They're like, it's open. It's fucking open. As we were listening to the scratching, looking at each other, eyes fucking bugging out of our heads, we started to hear a noise, and it was like a gurgling noise. I don't know if you guys remember the last story that I told about my friend Jamie and I seeing the skinwalker, what we thought was a skinwalker, but it sounded very similar to that noise. My brother and I basically like sat there trying to convince each other that it was just our imagination and that everything was fine. But my brother, about 10 years old at the time, was at the ripe age of wanting to be the hero. So he peeked his head around the corner, like out of the doorway, the open fucking doorway of the hunter's cabin, to see what was out there. And me back in the fucking cabin, like in the corner of the cabin, I was like, no, stop doing that. Like trying not to be loud for anything outside to hear us. But like at the same time, I was like, no, stop, what are you doing? Like, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna tell mom if you fucking die? Like, stop. So after a few seconds of him, looking out the cabin door, he whips his body back inside, tears streaming down his face. I couldn't even get a word out, and he said, we have to go now. There's nothing out. Like, he couldn't even say anything else. He said, we need to go now. Tears streaming down his face. I was about to argue with him because I didn't want to go out into the darkness of the woods alone, but the look on his face told me that something was seriously wrong. I just, assumed maybe he saw like a wolf or a bobcat or a bear, even, because in our area, those types of animals are very common. But as we were getting ready to bolt, I smelt it, and it smelled like death and decay, like old rotting body, not freshly killed rotting body. So we ran as fast as we possibly could. I lost sight of my brother. I'm pretty sure he lost sight of me, but I could hear his feet running somewhere next to me. But I could also hear something running behind us. I didn't say anything. I didn't dare look back. I just kept running until it felt like my legs could no longer survive. We did end up getting out of the woods. However, it was nowhere near the spot where we went into the woods. So thankfully, we knew our way around the town. So we were able to like walk our way back home, but it took much longer than we initially wanted it to, and it was still dark outside, but at least we were by the road, right? So then once we got to the road, we started catching our breath, and that's when I started begging him to tell me what he saw. That boy looked me dead in the eye and said it was tall. It had the legs of a horse. He said it had long, gangly arms and sharp, pointy fingertips. He said that it had the head of a wolf, but it wasn't. And he said it was looking right at me. Its eyes were piercing into my eyes. To this day, I don't necessarily know what it was because, like I said, I didn't see it, but I've asked him over the years, and he thinks that it could potentially be like a Wendigo or a skinwalker or a jinn, potentially. But he specifically is leaning more towards Wendigo after doing a little bit of his own research since the site. But yeah, needless to say, I guess be careful in the woods because you never know what is out there. I guess it doesn't really help that we kind of lived in an area that was close to the Vermont portion of the Appalachian Trail, so weird things happen on the Appalachian Trail.
I got my first mermaid story. Creepy TikTok user tales. I got an email from someone who lives in the Caribbean. They said like Trinidad, specifically Tobago. They told me that they had an encounter with a river mermaid. She told me that this happened in the morning, and she and her father were walking to his garden, which was about a 10-minute walk away from their house. Where the garden was, she said that it was like very bushy, but if you went through those bushes, you would come to the bank of a river. She said she was about 10 or 11 years old, and she decided that day, after her and her dad had gotten to the garden, that she was going to walk down to the river. She says as she approaches the river, she sees something slap on the top of the water, which is like this giant fin. She said at first she didn't think much of it, just thinking maybe it's a fish, I don't know, until she started to get this really eerie feeling. Then she says that the next thing that she knows, she's actually being drawn closer and closer to the river, almost like something is calling her there. She says that she's walking towards the river, and then all of a sudden she has this feeling like, you need to run, you need to get out of here right now, do not go near that river. She says that in that moment, this intense ringing just starts blaring in her ears. She said in the midst of everything that's going on with the ringing in her ears, the terrible feeling that she's having, she looks down at the water. When she looks at the water, what she sees beneath the surface is just something sitting there and it's glowing. The water all around it is glowing. She says that after she sees this, she becomes really scared and she covers her ears and is finally able to break like this trance of like wanting to go near the water, but something telling her not to. And she immediately just runs back to her dad as fast as she can. She told me that after she got back to her dad, she told him what happened and he told her that it sounded like a river mermaid of some sort. I did take her exact description and I plugged it into AI, so I'm going to insert that now. Just imagine the river that day looking something like this. Now, I wasn't there, so I can't say for sure that this is exactly what she saw. This is just what AI creates when told what she saw. She also told me that after the mermaid incident, she went back to that exact spot sometime later and then had an encounter with something called a jumbie. She said that her and her sister were out and they were walking by the river and they saw this tall, dark shadow. She pointed it out to her sister and her sister said, "It's probably just the shadow of a tree. Don't worry about it." They continue on. As they get closer and they're about to cross the river, they hear this loud squeal. After they hear this squeal, they're looking at the tall, dark figure and they realize that it is something in their country called a jumbie and they run away as fast as they can. She told me that the jumbie is easily as tall as like a 3-story building, so easily mistakable for the shadow of a tree. I don't know much about Caribbean culture, so if I mispronounce that or if I'm wrong, please correct me. But as always, thank you guys so much for listening. If you have a story you'd like to send me, there's an email in my bio, or you can send me a DM. As always, my disclaimers, these stories are not mine. They were sent to me by physical people. If I know you, these are not your stories. And thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
I have another possible skinwalker story. This was sent in, and I can't decide if I think this is like a real person type of situation or a skinwalker. Let me tell you all about this. Remember, not too long ago, I posted a video about a girl that had somebody in her backyard screaming, and all of you said that it was like a bobcat or something like that, and then like a dog tried to get in the house. Well, someone commented on that video and was like, "Oh, that happened to me," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, tell me all about it." So they finally messaged me, and here's their story. She said that they were laying in bed, it was her and her husband, and they hear a woman scream. And they said that they're in Alabama, they know what a bobcat sounds like. It was not a bobcat, but they hear a woman scream, and then they hear a man yell, "Help me, hey, help me," or something like that. And then the woman screamed again, and then the "help me" again. So they called the police come out there, they look around, they can't find anything. Her husband goes out and drives around, they can't find anything. She said that they live in a new subdivision, like a cul-de-sac, and only thing that's behind them is a grown-up field with nothing really. Morning after they hear the screaming and all of that going on, they wake up and there is a dog in their backyard. And she said it wasn't like just a random like dog. This looked like a dog that clearly belonged to someone. So she called the neighbors. The neighbors didn't know who it was. She has a fenced in backyard, so does the neighbor. The dog was trying to get in and she was gonna let the dog in, and her husband's like, "Stop it. No, we're not just going to let some random dog come in here. What is up with my hair?" So then the neighbor almost let the dog in too. Well, then the dog like disappears. End of the dog. But why was the dog there? It could be just a regular dog, or it could be a skinwalker, because last week in a abandoned home, she said it was like a half a mile from them, they found a decomposing unalived person. They couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman because they said that they thought it'd been there like 6 or 7 months, which is the same time frame of them hearing the screaming. Yeah, I'm thinking what you're thinking, like, is this the person that was screaming? Is this not the person that was screaming? Does it have anything to do with each other? Like, what is this? Who is this? Who was that? So many questions that we don't have any answers to, but what do you guys think? Do you think that the dog had something to do with it? Do you think that it was all just like a trick? But all neighbors heard it. All neighbors heard the screaming. Who was screaming? Was it that person they found in that house? I need to know. I need to know. If you enjoy things like this, like, comment, share, follow for more. I talk about it all the time, and you can also follow me on all other platforms as well under the same name.
Welcome to Appalachian Cryptid Stories. The amount of comments I've gotten about this, I've answered a lot of them, so at this point I'm just going to make a video response and hope people see it. What's in the trees? I'll tell you my experience. Whatever it is, it likes to blend in. You could be like looking up directly into the trees and not see it. But when you see it, you see it. And you gotta just hope and pray that it doesn't realize that you're looking at it, because it's always watching you. My biggest experience actually happened when I was looking in the wood line rather than like actually looking up in the trees. It was getting pretty dark and me and my dad were outside doing our thing and listening for noises that kind of bounce off the mountain. You know, I've lived in the valley for quite a while, so you kind of get accustomed to like when like the yells start, when you start getting like the most activity. One of our biggest like activity times was like between 11 o'clock to about 4 o'clock in the morning. And like monkeys, you could see them like swinging from tree to tree. You could see the trees like bending down to support their weight. And it freaked me and my dad out pretty bad. It's like one of those experiences of like, if we tell anybody, they're not going to believe us. So I've kept this to myself for the past 2 years. But I don't care. So you could hear the trees thrashing, but like you couldn't exactly hear any noises coming from them. I don't know if that's necessarily like the only creature that's in the trees, because I know like there have been experiences with dogmen in the trees, and I can definitely see that happening. I commented under somebody like werewolves probably, because dogmen have also been known to be found in trees sometimes, just kind of staring at you and looking all ominous and mean. I don't have much info about these creatures. I don't. Just because I know the lore of the Appalachian Mountains and just because I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains doesn't mean I'm necessarily all in tune with the cryptids. I remember there was like this one Lost Tapes episode that was on Animal Planet like way back in the day. I feel like the OG cryptid watchers will know what I'm talking about. They like released an episode on like devil monkeys. And I was always like, that's a funny name. But they said they're very common in Virginia too. Who knows? Maybe it's a devil monkey. It's probably a devil monkey. Either way, these things have very intense prey drives. Have you thought about like the bodies in the Appalachian Mountains that have just ended up in trees inconspicuously? You gotta think about shit like that.
Okay, so I was not planning on doing another story time tonight because I'm still trying to get over being sick, and my voice is just kind of giving Miley Cyrus's hit cousin, but we're gonna do it anyway because I got to talking with my mom tonight, and she shared some stories. She sent me videos, and she shared some stories and reminded me of some things that happened when I was growing up in Tennessee. And the last two stories in particular that she, told me, one, I'm going to have to save for another day, because just to be honest, it like put a pit in my stomach in the same way that like the story that I first shared, my very first spooky story where I told y'all about how my boyfriend saw me sitting on the bed, but it wasn't me. It was another thing like that looked like me. So it's like that kind of vibe, and it makes me feel sick at my stomach. Because these are not just spooky stories. These are real things. Like, these are things that have happened in my life. So I'm going to save that one for maybe another day this week. But the one I'm sharing tonight is equally as freaky, but just in a different type of way. Okay, now this story happened when I was like 5 or 6 years old. I have to give you guys some preface on this, because if I don't, you're going to be like, what the hell, Haley? Like, you need to understand. So the property that I grew up at in Tennessee, my mama and papa had lived on that property for years until my papa passed away. When my papa passed away, my mama, she stayed there for a while, but eventually sold the house. When she sold the house, my family bought it, my mom and my dad, and then we moved in there. Now, before my mama moved out of that place, when my papa passed away, she was insistent on having my papa buried on that property. She wanted him close. That was her way of coping with that grief. And it was a big property. They owned it. She had him initially buried on the edge of the wood line in the backyard, like up close to where my papa's woodshed was. And we eventually, after we moved in, had him moved to like a cemetery and everything. My mama was like okay with that, so we did. But when we first moved in there, my papa was still buried there. So that's the preface, because this story took place at my papa's grave at my house in Tennessee. So as I said, I'm 5 or 6 years old, and I remember this. So on this day, I'm outside, and I had picked some wildflowers for my papa's grave. I would always pick him wildflowers and take them to his grave and sing him a song, and that's what I was doing this day. My mom was doing dishes, and she was watching me out the kitchen window. Out the kitchen window, you see the backyard all the way up to the wood line where my papa's buried. So she's watching me. It's a sad thing. Like I'm grieving, you know, my papa, and so as she is standing there, it's kind of just like this little bittersweet thing. She all of a sudden gets a really eerie, icky vibe, like something is wrong. And at the same time, now I'll tell you her perspective, and then I will backtrack and tell you mine, because they were synchronized experiences, even though we are an entire yard apart, okay? And I'm really young. So she gets this super creepy feeling, and at the same time, she watches me stand up. Now, she has the kitchen window open, so she can hear to an extent, you know, and she hears me scream really loud. And I had, like, when I first stood up, I was like, I turned around and started looking up in the woods, and I didn't see what she saw somehow, but so I scream, and as I scream, she just knows. She said, Haley, run. So I start hightailing it down to the house. I run my little ass all the way to the front yard. I was not messing around. So to backtrack and kind of tell you what I experienced, okay? And I'm going to tell you what my mom saw. Super freaking creepy. I have no idea what it was. So I just remember I'm literally on my hands and knees by his grave. I have the flowers by his grave. All of a sudden, I felt this, I don't know, it was like a primal kind of fear, like when your adrenaline kicks in, kind of primal fear. Don't know why. I thought that I heard like leaves rustling or something. That's so common. I lived in the middle of the mountains. Leaves rustling normally wouldn't scare me, you know, but I knew something was wrong. I felt like something was there, or like I was being watched or something. I don't know how to explain it. I just know that it scared me really bad. When I turned around and looked into the woodline, I didn't see anything. I was just frozen. I was like paralyzed for a minute. Didn't see anything. And then I hear my mom yell, Haley, run. And that's when I take off. Now my mom, after she said, Haley, run. So when my mom screams, Haley, run, she looks up. There's a huge oak tree in the edge of the woods right by the grave and my papa's woodshed. She sees she says like a figure, like a human figure, because we don't know if it was actually a man. I don't think that men are 7 feet tall very often. She said that it was in dark clothing, and she could clear as day make out an arm, and from the shoulders down, the whole body, like just like you're seeing me, like a whole body. Doesn't make sense why she could not see facial features, but she could not. The sun's out, like she can see the skin, you know, the dark clothing. And she said that this thing had some sort of a staff or a pole, and she said it was like thick in diameter. It's not like a fishing pole. It's like, imagine like a piece of like PVC pipe or some shit. I don't know what else. So she said that it was like a silver color, glistening in the sun even, and it had it in its hand, like, you know, like standing there like freaking Gandalf, I don't know, about 7 foot tall, and it like peers out from behind this oak tree. And so she thinks there is some sort of a man up there, and that he is like trying to hurt me or kidnap me or break into my papa's woodshed. Now, it's super creepy to have anybody on your property, but a property that remote, that's even scarier, because why are you all the way back there? And so she runs out onto the back porch. When she gets onto the back porch, she doesn't see it. And so she is looking, she's too scared to run up there. She's looking around, and then she starts thinking, like, this was so real. What if, you know, there's this fishing pond that's like way back in the woods and stuff. What if, you know, my dad, he was at this pond. What if his truck broke down and he like walked back through the woods or something like that, because it was quicker than taking the road. And so right about that time, my dad pulls in the driveway in his truck. Now she screams for him, and she said, "Jeff, there's somebody in the woods up here." So my dad takes off in that little pickup truck through the yard all the way up to the wood line. He gets up there, he jumps out, he's running around through the woods, looking in the shed, like there's nobody. There is not a trace of anybody. Now Mom said she saw this thing, this man, whatever, go back behind this big oak tree. He never came out from behind that oak tree. There is no way he could have walked away or like without her seeing. You know what I mean? So we still don't know what it was. We never found out. So yeah, that's the story. I don't know what to make of it. I have very clear memories of it. One of my earlier childhood memories, and my mom, you know, obviously remembers it. There were quite a few things that happened at that house in Tennessee, and we will have to share more about that house at a later time.
Okay, story time about my trip to Appalachia. While I was doing my spooky road trip last fall, I went to a ton of different haunted locations, and Appalachia was by far the creepiest. I am a paranormal investigator. Usually I like to bring my dog to locations with me, which is what I did. It was just me and my dog alone in Appalachia.
Here he is. Say hello, Rocky.
I was originally driving into the campsite I was staying at in the mountains. I was in my RV, and it was daytime, and I was still getting this weird sick feeling in my stomach, like, I shouldn't be here. I don't get paranoid, by the way, for anybody wondering. I don't get scared easily and I don't get freaked out, but driving in there, I could not shake this feeling like something does not want me here. In the entire week I was in Appalachia, I constantly felt watched. It felt like somebody was right behind me looking over my shoulder, even when I was completely alone. I walked Rocky into the woods one afternoon when we were there, and I didn't think we were that far from the campsite, honestly. I thought we were just sticking to the trail, going a few hundred yards, whatever. And suddenly I look back and realize we are far up the mountain. I also realized the sun is about to set, and I am not going to make it back before nightfall. We're just about to turn around when I hear something call my name. Very distinctly, I heard Camilla whispered. I look around and obviously there is nothing around me. Like, I am completely alone with my dog. So we turn around, we walk back, and I hear it again. Camilla. And it sounds very close to me, like within, I don't know, 3 feet of me, and there is nobody around. As the sun started sinking lower and lower and it started getting darker, I could tell that something was wrong. It was very quiet in the woods while we were walking back. I didn't hear any birds. I didn't hear any wildlife. And I had that feeling, again, like I was being watched. And I had no idea where it was coming from because it felt like it was all around me. But I had a chill go up my spine, and I just tried to get out of there as fast as I possibly could. We got back to the campsite, and I put my dog, into his bed for the night, gave him his toy and whatever. And I went outside to fix the propane tank and to have a cigarette. We were in the corner lot, so that means that I was here. The wood line for the mountains, like going up, was right there. There was nothing between me and the woods. At one point I look over and I see a man standing in the tree line, just staring at me. He is at least 6 feet tall and he is completely motionless. I get up and I'm trying to determine, like, is it another person from the RV camp being a fucking creep? Like, I have no idea what is going on. So I watch him for a while and he doesn't move at all. He just keeps staring at me. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could feel his eyes, if that makes sense. Like, I knew without seeing his face that he was looking directly at me. I got so uncomfortable that I went back into my RV, and when I went out a few minutes later, he wasn't there. There were several nights that I heard noises that I still can't explain. It sounded like banshees shrieking, but worse. It was the most blood-curdling, god-awful noise I have ever heard. I don't know if it was mountain lions or whatever, but it was terrifying. I also had luck the entire time I was there. It felt like something didn't want me there. I crashed my RV at the Biltmore Estate one day. It was a lot. So for consistent scariness, it's definitely Appalachia. I forgot to mention the things I saw watching me from the road while I was driving one night.
This is a res story I heard near Cherokee, North Carolina. There was this guy who said when he was younger and he lived with his parents that his dad would, at night, they had these pieces of plywood attached to hinges that they would close over the windows and they would padlock. And he always wondered why every night his dad would padlock the windows shut. Well, one day he decided to ask his father, and he said, "Father, why do you lock the windows at night? Like, what are you trying to keep out?" And his dad just looks at him and says, "You don't ask about that. We don't talk about it. Like, you ask anymore, you're going to be grounded. You're going to be in trouble." And he was like, surprised that his dad was so angry when he'd asked that question. And so he always wondered in the back of his mind, like, what was he trying to keep out of the house? Well, one night he is in his bedroom and he's having trouble sleeping. And he looks over at his alarm clock and it's exactly 3:03 a.m. And he starts hearing, and he hears this whistling, like coming from outside of the house. And he keeps hearing it over and over again. So he gets up and he goes out into the living room and his dad is out there kind of frantically moving back and forth, pacing around. And he goes, "Dad, why are you, like, what is that whistling? Like, why are you up? And what is that whistling sound? Like, are you making that?" And he goes, No, stop talking about it. Look, you need to go back into your bedroom and go to sleep. It'll be all right. And he said his dad was just like terrified. And so he went back into his bedroom and he said it went on for a little bit and then it stopped. And he said he started to realize, like, late at night, every time at 3:03 a.m., right, he would hear whistling and it would sound like it was coming from outside the house. And his dad would be up, just sort of walking the hallways, walking the floors, like freaking out. So, he was always confused about what this sound was. So one day he goes over to the neighbor's house and he goes, at night we hear this whistling sound and it happens every night, at the same time. Like, do you know anything about it? Do you hear the whistling? And he said, the neighbor said, "You need to go home right now." Like, and his neighbor wouldn't talk about it and was like creeped out and like instantly like went inside his house. So he kept trying to get it out of people in town. Like, does anybody know about like this whistling sounds that happen at night? Like, do you know what that is? No one would talk about it. So one night he is like hanging out with his brother in his bedroom, and they decided they were going to kind of stay up late telling some scary stories. Well, at like 3:03 in the morning, they hear, and they hear the whistling. And he tells his brother, like, "Do you hear that?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Every morning I hear that at like 3:03, and like Dad freaks out and stuff." And his brother's like, "Well, why don't you just like try and open one of the windows up and, see if you could get the key, unlock the padlock, and look out the window?" And he's like, "What? No, are you kidding? Like, Dad would freak out. Dad would freak out." And his brother's like, "Well, if you're not brave enough, I'll go do it." So he said his brother like snuck out into his parents' bedroom and got like his dad's keys and went over to one of the windows, unlocked it, and then moved the plywood away from the window. And when he looked out the window, he sort of just jumped back and he turned around and had just this look of dread on his face. And he didn't talk, he didn't say anything. And so he kept asking his brother, like, "What did you see? What did you see?" And his brother wouldn't say anything. And his brother's like, I'm going to go to bed." And he said right as his brother started walking to the bedroom, all of a sudden at the door, he hears boom, 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 boom. Someone is knocking at the door. And he hears it again. Boom, 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 boom. This loud knocking. And he goes up to the door and gets really close. And all of a sudden, his dad comes running out and grabs him and says, "Do not open that door, son." And he's like, "Why? Who's out there? Like, who's outside?" And he's like, we can't say anything about it. We don't talk about it. Like, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay." And he said all night long, they heard the knocking on the door. So the next morning when he gets up, right, his brother is very, very ill. And it's like his brother just got worse and worse and then eventually passed away. And he said he always attributed his brother what he had seen out of that window. Like, maybe that is what was the cause of what happened to him. And he said still to this day, his father will not talk about it, what was outside the house.